Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to Squeeze Fan TV, the daily Squeeze vlog, whatever you want to call it. My name's James Griffiths. If you stumbled upon the channel for the first time, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, welcome. Do please click to like the video if you enjoy it, and if you really enjoy the content, please would you consider subscribing. That would be very kind. We're on almost 30 subscribers now. It'd be great to get to 50. So yeah, if you're enjoying this, do please jump on board with a sub, and do feel free to share the video as widely as you like. Right, so housekeeping over, let's do another song of the day. Now I did put up a poll on the community tab, and one person responded, so whoever you are, thank you very much. I'm going to keep doing this now. I'm going to give a choice of 2 different songs, and whoever gets the most votes, whichever song gets the most votes, I'll do that. So one person chimed in, so one of the 2 songs that I put out there won the poll, and that song is Someone Else's Heart from East Side Story. And this is quite a classy song, I think, and what's interesting about it is that it's the second song on the album, but it's the first song on the album that is produced by Elvis Costello and Roger Bakarian. The first song on the record is In Quintessence, which, as we all know, was produced by Dave Edmunds, and that does sound a bit different to the rest of the record. It's got a different sound, probably sounds a bit more like what they've been doing before. I do seem to remember when this album came out, when Someone Else's Heart came on, it did seem to be quite different, had a more sonically interesting sound, I think. It's almost like they pressed a little accelerator pad on their musical development, you know, Elvis and Roger Bakarian. I think Roger Bakarian was taking care of the sounds in the studio and really crafting a studio sound. Costello was more working on the arrangements and, you know, trying to get each song to be different and to have a different angle, a different musical angle. And this song, musically, Someone Else's Heart, it's got a really interesting vibe to it. It's quite claustrophobic, quite a sort of nighttime feel. You've got John Bentley's bass line, which is not exactly funky. It's just got something of the night about it. I don't know how to explain it really. And Gilson's drum rhythm is really interesting, and it sounds like something that Ringo Starr might have done. It just has a sort of interesting syncopated pattern to it. The other thing musically which is really interesting about this song is just the vocals. You've got Chris Difford for the first time on record doing this high-pitched voice, or higher-pitched voice than his usual bullfrog voice. It's a kind of soft, tremulous voice, and apparently we didn't know this until years later when Song by Song came out. This is a voice that Chris had early on. He'd been singing that way before the band got their record deal, and at some point down the line he decided he was going to go with the bullfrog type voice, and Glenn had to really persuade him in the studio to adopt this different voice. I think Elvis Costello also kind of, you know, helped him along with it, and so that was really interesting. Also, of course, on this track, you've got the brilliant backing vocals of Paul Carrack as well, who chimes in on the When the Pop Music Played refrain, which just makes for a really interesting sound. I'm so fond of this song, actually. It's just occurred to me that the line, the pop music played, was the inspiration for my book, Squeeze the Pop Music Played, which came out a couple of years ago. On Amazon still, if you want to purchase it. I'll talk about that in a future video. But yeah, let's just go back quickly to Someone Else's Heart. Just going to see if we've got some lyrics in the book for this one, because it's always nice to share the lyrics. No, Someone Else's Bell is in there. Not to worry. Well, we all know the song. The song essentially is a sort of paranoid glimpse into a relationship, and you know, I got nosy and read her letters too. It's about a couple who are basically prying into each other's private lives, you know, rifling through handbags, looking at diary entries. And years later, Chris finally came clean about the lyric, and it wasn't really what we all thought. It was to do with the fact that him and his wife, his new wife at the time, you know, Chris used to spend quite a lot of time away from home. And his wife, or maybe at the time she was his fiancée, used to look through his diaries, you know, to check what he'd been doing. And it was all quite amicable when Chris found out about it. Apparently he was he was absolutely fine about it. But, you know, on this album, there seems to be a kind of thread running through it of infidelity and affairs. You get it again, actually, in Someone Else's Bell. There's a reference in that, isn't there? He says, don't you think I see it? Your handbag's full of notes. And I guess the song Tempted as well is a song about, you know, an extramarital affair. So all this stuff was in Chris's lyrical toolkit at the time, but in fact he was newly married and he was quite happily married, so this was all fictionalised stuff really. Might have come true a bit later on. In fact, interestingly, Elvis Costello years later went on to cover this song, and Elvis, I think prior to this, he'd had a thing with his wife at the time, whose name escapes me now, I can't remember. But in the Elvis Costello biography by Graham Thompson, it says in that Elvis and his wife at the time used to read each other's diaries and check each other's bags for notes and everything. It's interesting that Elvis ended up covering this song, and I've always wondered whether he had something to do with the lyrical aspect of it in the studio, you know, working with Chris. It was clearly a song that had chimed with him for some reason, you know, because he'd covered it. Anyway, in Song by Song, Chris says, I wrote the words on a notepad at a motorway service station between the M6 and Liverpool. It was a little too high for me to sing, but I quite liked the sound of my voice on it. And then Glenn just goes on to explain about this voice of Chris's, which had always been there. He also heaps praise on Paul Carrack, saying, you know, vocally it opened up an entirely different set of windows, as in having Paul in the band. On this song, Chris sang half the verses while Paul and I sang the other half. Yeah, so Paul and Glenn are both on it. It's a song that they used to do live, as he points out here. And then Chris says, I like Gilson's imaginative drumming, although John's bass playing sounds wooden and rather dated. There we go. So Chris was not a fan of John's bass work on this song. And then he says, I have a soft spot for this number because it was written quickly and songs written that way are quite important to me. So, yeah, I think a really important song. As I said, it's the first song on East Side Story where you hear that Costello, Roger McKieran production. It just has a great atmosphere to it, I think. A clever melodic song, something a bit different for Squeeze. They hadn't quite done anything like that up to that point. And it's a shame the song is not in the set list still. But we can say that about quite a few songs, can't we? Anyway, let me know what you think of Someone Else's Heart. It'd be great to read your comments about that, and I will see you in the next video.